It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, April 18th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that always finds it fascinating what the players themselves think of their own season.
Yeah, the ones that are fully honest.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. It is the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is not only apparently gray sweatshirt day for us, but it
This
is
is sky blue. I will have you know.
okay. With the lighting, it looks gray.
Yeah.
It is also locker cleanout day, or it was yesterday for the Flyers, and a lot of them I thought had some interesting things to say and some themes throughout all of them. But first, we got to talk about Massimo Rizzo. We talked about him on yesterday's show and a bunch recently. Wondering what was going to happen with him, and we got that PTO done.
Yeah, he's signed. I don't know if he's going to play though. Like we haven't heard
Uh,
any word on that. Yeah, 2-year ELC that starts next year.
yeah,
I see these kind of like I don't know. Best way I could put it is bogus scouting reports on him. Like even if you didn't know anything about him, if you watched the last game, the Frozen Four final game, you saw a guy that was putting it all out there defensively.
yeah.
He was important on the power play. And yet I saw things, that just boggled my mind. But, he's not a superstar. He could be a very nice player. And I do think he's still a third line player. And you're always going to need those kinds of guys. And it doesn't mean he can't rise up and be more. But right now, that's what my projection is for him. But I do think he'll make it. And I think, if he makes it, that's a success right there. So, smart kid. I do think there's offensive ability. And, Brink spoke about him.
Yep.
I think in a way he could be better than Brink because he's a little bit faster and he plays better defense. So Brink is the fancier offensive guy, but he hasn't really, broken through yet. So I think in a way Rizzo could be better.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be the big difference maker there in terms of, looking at the two of them. And it is kind of unfortunate that they're gonna get compared, but it's
Yeah.
only natural when you look at
Yeah.
them and, physical style of play and both coming from Denver and all of that. The comparisons are naturally gonna be there, but, I think that yeah, it'll just depend with Rizzo if the offense can break through because you're right, he can do all of the other things that he needs to do. And I think he'll come in with the right attitude to get it done based on how hard he's worked in his college career to get to where he is.
Yeah. I mean, he's a champion and that whole
Twice.
program, yeah, twice, and that makes you work. And David Carl's a great coach, and I've spoken to David Carl at length, and I've been very impressed with him. So yeah, he's going to be a really good ad, good guy to have around.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Lawton is the team's King Clancy Award nominee, which is really good to see. Again, a no brainer. We talked a lot about
Yeah.
Lawton yesterday when we talked about the Flyers Team Awards, and he is just a bright, shining star for this organization. And I'd be really upset if they traded him. I think he's just such a good part of this organization, and he's a glue guy in a lot of ways that transcend on ice.
I don't disagree with you, but again, it really depends what the coach thinks about him. So I still think there's a 50% chance he's getting traded. But I
Yeah,
agree with
don't
everything you say.
Yeah, don't want to talk about him in that way, but we'll cross that bridge if we have to, let's say. Just want to remind everyone from yesterday's show, we put up a listener poll over on our YouTube channel about how you think the season went, whether it was successful or not, and would love to get as many responses as possible. We're going to talk about the results of that on tomorrow's show. The link to the poll is in the show notes. Want to start talking about locker cleanout day. We heard from players, did not hear from coaches or management
No.
later in the week.
Yeah, I'm not sure why other teams have already had everybody go, but that's the way they're doing it. So that's the way they're doing it.
Yeah, so we will talk about what they had to say on the Monday show. But as far as the players, I think there were definitely some overarching themes with, repeated things that all the guys or most of the guys had to say. And, one thing that has been consistent this whole season, you asked any player all season long, and it continued yesterday, was there was never any doubt on this team. Even during the losing streak at the end of the season, there just wasn't any loss of confidence that this team could get it done.
Yeah, I never doubted that part of things, and so I'm not shocked that they believed that they could come back and get in a playoff spot, and that's fine. You have to have that belief.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think that is something that I really hope continues forward into next season. Things always change a little bit because the personnel always, turns
Oh, things.
over
I think
a
things are going
little
to
bit.
change a lot. I mean, just I'll
Yeah.
give you a sneak preview. Sneak preview. There's no Carter Hart. So now Sam Urson has to win at the same
Well,
rate that Carter Hart did early in the year. That's the sneak preview. We'll talk about that more down the line.
yeah. Yeah, that's like one thing, and that kind of brings me to my next theme of locker cleanout day is, um, you know, you almost forget that they went through a lot of upheaval this
Sure.
season. They came into the season without a captain, with a different number one goaltender than they anticipated. you know, Things just completely changed after Carter Hart left. And there was definitely adversity in this season for the Flyers, and with injuries and all of that. But I think there were some unique things that this team had to go through, and
Well, some of them
uh,
self-inflicted though. So as an
yeah,
example,
sure,
as an example, I give Scott Lawton great credit because he really is always honest, hard on the sleeve, and he said it was tough when they benched Sean Couturier, and that was a big
yeah.
downside of this season. That never should have happened. It definitely affected the team, and he's telling you it affected the team.
Yeah, and I think they did go through a lot, but they got through and they pushed through, and I think, like, especially in the last few games where they turned it around after that losing streak,
Mhm.
it just kinda showed their fortitude that
Yeah,
they
no
had
question. It
all
definitely
season
showed that.
long. Yeah, and I would say um, related to that, the team was, also relishing the underdog mentality all season long, and it was something that was important to the cohesiveness
Yeah,
of the
that's fine.
team.
I mean, and they should have. That's all those things are healthy and good things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is something that when we look back at this season with a little bit more distance and a little bit more clarity, that's going to be a huge aspect to this season. And I am looking forward to looking back at some of the prognostications from the beginning of the season and comparing it to where the Flyers ended up. And I think that'll be a huge positive for this offseason.
Yeah, I think we're gonna find that there's ups and downs in that, and that we were right on some of the things we were right about. Ultimately, you didn't want to be right about. So I think we're
Right.
gonna find some of that too.
Absolutely. Well, there are more things that came out of locker cleanout day and some specifics related to individual players. And we are, of course, going to have to talk about that power play because a lot of them did mention it as well. We'll do all of that coming up next.
We've all been there either as a player or a fan, and it's the second period break and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists and take much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The Smash Hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards.
Are you watching sports on cable TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Continuing locker cleanout day observations, I think that one of the biggest overarching themes of what everyone had to say is they do have a better sense of what it will take and look forward to the challenge of next season, and understanding, the ebbs and flows of a season when you are in the hunt, and understanding, every point counts and racking up more points earlier, so you don't run into a position like the Flyers did at the end of this season. And I think that it's interesting from a player perspective
Mhm.
because a lot of what happened was coaching related in terms of players getting overused and people being gassed at the end of the season. But the players put a lot of this on themselves and feel a
A
lot
little
of
too much. A
responsibility.
little too much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like Sean Couturier definitely put too much on himself. Like a lot of that
yeah,
stuff was out of his control and he just did the best he could. And I get it. Yeah, I mean, it's good. All these things are good because I think there's going to be a lot of hard times next year too, where they're going to have to really play uphill and figure out who they are again. Because now, there's going to be some new personnel in there, and we'll see. Like that's, you never know what's going to happen when you do that. So with the way it ended this year, it does give them confidence coming into the year,
yeah.
which should carry through in training camp. And then you have to just see how the chemistry is. Chemistry is a weird thing. You can never just bank on it.
I know, I know. That's the thing is like, oh, this group was so tight. And
Yeah.
so if there's any like tipping point in terms of too much change, that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. And if they can, pull it together in a similar way that they did this year.
Right.
But I think that they all have a really good attitude about it. And I
They
think
do.
that's important. One thing is like a bunch of guys were asked about the power play, and as much as we don't like talking about it anymore, um, again, I think the players put a lot of this on execution and on themselves. And I found it interesting that several guys over the course of the day mentioned Bradshaw and how much they learned from him.
Yeah.
Not one mention of Rocky Thompson.
No, and there really shouldn't be. No offense, but he just didn't do a good
Yeah, I
job.
know. I
And
know,
so
but
it's just the way it
the
is.
fact that it
And
came out
right.
in the locker cleanup day that way, I thought was really telling.
Yeah, I mean, because again, it's the biggest factor they didn't make the playoffs. There's no question about it. You can go with
Yeah,
the amount of points and how many points they would have had. So yeah, that's a frustrating that's a point of frustration for sure. So yeah, I don't blame the guys at all. I think they're telling it like it is in regard to that.
yeah, yeah, I just, thought it was interesting how you kinda had to read between the lines there, when the guys were talking about it.
Yeah.
O Other things of note with, individual players, you mentioned Sean Couturier, and, he was asked again about his relationship with John Tortorella, and he said what he had to say in a lot of ways, but I genuinely believe based on multiple players' experience with him and having heart to heart conversations in a way that they can move forward. I think that, it is honestly true that he's trying to put it behind him and that they'll continue to communicate over the summer and going into next season and try and get a good reset.
Sure. I also think they need to have a discussion about minutes and those other things. And John has to
Mhm.
start that discussion. It shouldn't be upon the player to say that, because then if the player says that, then the coach is going to be like, "Oh, so you can't play a full season? Is that what you're telling me?" Like it shouldn't have to be uncomfortable like that. But clearly it
Yeah.
is.
Right. And I think that they all learned a lot this year about communication with him. I think several guys did.
Right.
And
They learned about communication with him. Did he learn about communication with them? That's the question.
it is a good question. And, we have not heard from him yet on his side of things. So, to be continued on that aspect of things. I think also a lot of the younger guys just had such great attitudes in what they had to say, and just like a bunch of smart kids who really get it in a lot of ways. And I thought Bobby Brink really exemplified that in just in terms of being self-critical, but also proud of himself in terms of what he was able to do after coming back from Lehigh Valley when he was sent down. And I thought he just had a really healthy balance of, what this season has meant to him in terms of confidence building, but also knowing how much further he has to go.
Yeah, that's the hard part is I'm glad he's not down about it. And
Hmm.
I don't know how the coaching staff feels about him. I don't think it's great because he didn't play in the third period. So he might feel great and he also might not, you know, be on the team much longer. Like that could be a reality. So I'm happy he is acting that way though. That's
Hmm.
good. And I do believe him when he says that. Unfortunately, I do not believe Morgan Frost. I think Morgan Frost is probably mad, and he has a right to be because he's the
Yeah.
one that's had to bend over backwards and really change his game, conform to the coach, and he did everything that coach wanted him to do and more. And again, really inexplicably seems to be the most highly criticized player on that team, and I don't get it.
Yeah, I think that, the way that Morgan Frost talked about it in the closing interview is that he learned a lot about himself and how to manage those emotions.
Right.
And I think that, maybe he shouldn't have had to experience some of them in the first place, but if he took from all of this that he's, like, better able to handle it on an emotional level, and he knows now how all of that affects his game on the ice and how to prevent that moving forward. I mean, that is a huge lesson for a guy to learn, when you're in a difficult situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually been incredibly consistent because if you look at his stats, playing 10 games, 10 fewer games, he was within 5 points of his career high in points. He was close to what his shots attempted were last year. His minutes are close. His faceoffs won are real close. He's actually a higher percentage at 49.5, and he shouldn't have missed 10 games. And actually, he would have been a 50-point guy this year. I believe that. They didn't allow it. The team, the coach, whatever. So there's upside there that they're not even tapping into. That's what annoys me.
Yeah, I get it. I get it, but again, he's just taken it like a champ, and
He
I could
is.
not be more impressed with Morgan Frost as a player and as a person.
Same here.
Uh, Want to talk about Sam Urson because I think it's important. He was asked specifically about is he going to prepare differently this summer, knowing that he could play 50 games next season or more. And he said, no, I got to
He's
prepare the
not
way
being
I'm going to
honest. No,
prepare.
he's not being
But
honest.
that's what I was gonna say. He did hint that he knows there's going to be a battle at camp
Uh-huh.
next year, and he's gonna be ready for it. So,
I
I
don't
think
think
he
there's going to
knows.
be much of a battle. I'll be honest. And I'm not
I
basing
don't
it
think
off of
so either,
I'm not
but
and I'm
I
not
think
basing it off of what we saw or didn't see during the season. I'm just basing it on the fact that there is no experience with Fedotov in the NHL. And to
yeah,
throw him right in there even next year, even if he looks good in training camp and 3 or 4 preseason games seems crazy to me. So I don't think there's much of a battle.
no, I don't think so either, but, I think, showing that he has the attitude as if
No, and
there
that's good.
is
The attitude that
important.
he's going to go and grab the job, I think that's the right attitude. No question.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, we talked a lot this season about Travis Sanheim and Cam York and having to take on additional
Mhm.
responsibility. And I think a lot of them, like the two of them grew a lot. And the fact that they had to do it together as a pairing and switching sides for part of the season and all of that, I think that Cam York especially was pretty humble about it, and praised Travis Sanheim as being a good partner, and that going through this stretch together was really good for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, the John Tortorella way is always seemingly having 2 or 3 good players playing on the opposite side of what they're used to. That just seems to be a norm with him. So, yeah, it did work out really, really well. He averaged almost like 3 point almost 4 minutes. It's close to 4 minutes. It's like 340 something, more this year than last year per game. So, of course, his
That's a
points were
lot.
gonna go up. Yeah, and but on the other side is he still was a minus 20. And, you could poo-poo plus minus whatever, but that minus 20 does tell me that, look, when he's matching up against some of the top guys in the league, he's not always winning that battle. Matter of fact, he's losing, a fair amount of them. And that's something where I hope he could rise and do that, but I'm not sure he can. All I could tell you is if he was on the second pair, he'd be an excellent second pairing guy in this league. Really, really, really good. But he has to play this other role. So it's hard.
Yeah. To be continued. We will talk more about the end of season, of course, over the next several weeks on the show. Also, just as an asterisk, multiple guys thank the training staff, which is not something we would have
Oh
heard
no, they
last
wouldn't have done
year.
that under Chuck Fletcher. So
Yep.
that's a big improvement right there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We are diving back into NHL draft coverage as we will be doing more of that over the next couple months. We are going to continue our series and talk about Liam Greentree coming up next. We all know how important life insurance is, but it can be overwhelming trying to find the right policy on your own. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. I know it feels so much better to have insurance and not have to worry about family being covered. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the show notes to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. So the Flyers are locked in at number 12 unless a miracle happens with the lottery right
Right.
now. So Liam Greentree is somebody that could fit in that
Yeah,
range.
he'll be there.
And so I thought it was important to talk about him. He's a forward, a winger, and he already has a little bit of size. So he's
Mhm.
6'2", 198. So of course you can always get stronger, but he is already on the bigger side of things at 18 years old, which is good to see. Part of the Windsor Spitfires in, and like the scouting reports on this guy seem pretty good, Russ.
No, they're good. I mean, he averages over 20 minutes of ice time, which is a boatload. Um, so sure, certainly John Tortorella would like that. He draws more penalties than he gets. Instat told us that. Shots on goal 54%. He 43% on puck battles. I think that's where the strength part could be a little better, and it's going to have to be better. He doesn't get a lot of defensive zone starts, so that's his weakness, and that's something that he'll have to get better at over time. But accurate passer, very smart, terrific power
Hmm.
play distributor. He's a guy that teams will have on the ice late in the game because he can make things happen, especially if you're looking for offense. And he already knows how to use his frame and kind of keep guys away and shield the puck. So those are all good things, and he has had a really good season. It's just been up and up and up and up for him.
Yeah, and one of the things that stood out to me about him in looking at his highlights and reading up on him is that he's already a really good skater. Like his
Yes,
technique is very, very good, and that's something that a lot of people mentioned. And you often see with some of these guys like that are teetering toward the middle of the first round that they have the points on the board and they've been able to do that because they're dominant at that level, but their skating isn't quite up to
right.
NHL level. Like that happens all the time. Like, well, he's
Yeah,
really good, except he needs to work on his skating.
right.
Not with this guy. He
No, no,
already
no.
has really good technique, and that is something that I think is really important.
Yeah, when he comes rushing down the wing, he could be very effective and hard to handle. And he's
Yeah.
really good at that, and he's good around the net. And so these are things that, yeah, opposing teams have to kind of account for him on the ice. So yeah, he would be a nice guy to get. Uh, some people would say maybe it's third on the need list because you'd rather have a center or a defenseman, but you got to see who's on the board at that point.
Right. Right, and especially, you look at his output this season, 64 games played, 90 points, 36 goals, 54 assists. He was captain of the Spitfires as well, so he's got, a leadership background
Yeah,
in there, and, you can't discount that. And I think, like, when you're a guy that depends on, your frame and your puck possession skills, and that's your bread and butter, but you still put 90 points on the board. Like that says a lot about, what your potential ceiling could be.
it does. And little known fact, I was at that Windsor rink right before the pandemic, and I got to tell you, they had great pizza. I mean, great. I mean, it was like Sicilian, square Sicilian, and it was really, really good. And so, yeah, I was like impressed. That
One
was the
might say that Detroit style pizza bled over into
I
Windsor.
think it did. And to be honest, at that point in time in my life, and I still think it holds that that's the best pizza in Canada so far.
That is a bold statement.
Yeah. So if
All
you're
right.
another city, because I've had it in Vancouver, I've had it in Toronto. So if you're a city, step up. But Windsor's a worthy opponent.
Yeah, yeah. I think Detroit pizza is underrated. So
It
I
is.
get it. But going back to Liam, I think that, you know, he would be a really interesting option. I think he is sort of a 1A option for the Flyers, depending on what the board looks like. Because I think you're right. Like the priority should be a center or a defenseman given the way this draft is. But like I just would not pass this kid up if he's available and you don't see somebody that's high on your list left in those other positions.
Right. Like I just, a couple things I want to kind of dispel that I don't think we're going to see happen. When let's say they have 12 and 29, right? 12 and 29
Mhm.
is not getting you in the first round. It's just in the first 10. It's not doing
Right.
it. You're not getting in the top 10 for that. If they had something like 8 and 17, something like that, uh 11 and 13, maybe they could uh, you know, then you might be able to move down a couple slots, like from 8 to 10, work another deal, get another pick for another year. Like there might be other things that teams would do, but just to strictly move into the top 10, I don't think they can do it unless they gave up a big time player, which I don't think they're going to do. So I think people kind of need to don't put that on your wish list. Don't expect that. I don't think Danny Briere can pull that one off.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, what we're gonna do with that other pick is a whole other ball game, and
Yeah,
we're gonna break that down as well as we approach the
because
draft.
it's just
But
about a second round pick. And that's how teams look at it.
yeah,
When it's at 29, 30, 31, 32, it's a second round pick.
right, and I'm pretty sure Columbus is gonna retain their second round pick for this year, and it'll
Yeah,
push to next year. So we got to look at it as an early second round pick
correct.
for the Flyers,
And that
along with
does
the
change your
compensatory
strategy.
pick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They may
it
not want
does.
to take a home run swing on that now.
Yeah. I think they're gonna be a lot less risky than they might have been otherwise, because I don't think they're going to get that Columbus pick. But that being said, I do think that if the Flyers were smart, they would take a real hard look at Liam
Yeah, no
and
question.
think,
I mean, he has to be on their board. If he's not, there's something wrong.
yeah, absolutely. All right, that will do it for today's show. We will have more prospects in the coming weeks to talk about. If you have a draft eligible prospect you want us to talk about, maybe for one of those second round picks or late first round pick, we're always happy to talk about them. You can send them via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russell at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the Free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the Free Fire TV channels app.